Hello everyone, and welcome to the Oliver Creek Church of Christ online. My name is Smith Hopkins, and I'm the preaching minister for Oliver Creek. If you don't know, our campus is located in Bartlett, Tennessee, just outside of Memphis. And so if you're ever in our area, and especially if you live in our area, we would love to see you sometime soon. Once we get back worshiping and in class together on site, it would be a joy to have you. Thank you for joining us today. At Oliver Creek, our mission is the mission of God in Scripture, to be a church where people are transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. Here's what we think that looks like. It looks like people who glorify God with their lives and in worship. It looks like people who love one another and are connected like a family in Christ. And it looks like people who bless the world, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ in word and deed. That's what we're all about here at Oliver Creek. And we hope that this service today can help you be transformed into His image. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Welcome to Light in the Darkness. Hello everyone, and welcome to Light in the Darkness. Today is May 1st, and I think that this month of May, especially for parents, for high school students, for teenagers, maybe for college students, this month of May is going to be so strange because so many of the typical rites of passage have been disrupted. Those end-of-year celebrations, even things like exams, but also all of the other end-of-year school activities have been changed. Families, of course, are looking forward to the summer and some of what's already been lost there too. But right now in May, there's so much change. What do we do about this? Today, joining me is Luke Guard, my good friend, our youth minister at the Oliver Creek Church of Christ. And the reason is because Luke is a youth minister. He can speak into the teen experience. But back when Luke was in high school, he's going to share a story of some of the loss that he experienced and how he and his family coped and walked through that challenge. I think it's really helpful to listen to someone who's already been down a similar road. Luke's going to give us that perspective today. Right now, he's also walking with our kids at Oliver Creek on Zoom classes and in reading plans and discussion guides and many other ways. He's walking through the language of lament. He's got a series called From, I think, Pits to Praise. I appreciate Luke so much for joining us today on Light in the Darkness. Let's welcome him in now. Luke, thank you for joining us on Light in the Darkness. Luke is a dear good friend of mine. He is our youth minister at the Oliver Creek Church of Christ. He's also a professional counselor. And I appreciate, first of all the free therapy sessions you've given me. Start with that. Luke, do you mind telling everybody kind of where you grew up, how you came to faith, and maybe a little about your family?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Smith. I grew up in town called Salem, Virginia. not Salem witch trials. That's up north. Salem, Virginia, kind of in the southwest corner of the state. Um, had the pleasure of growing up with an amazing mother and father and older brother. Had a really close family of grandparents and uncle and aunt and cousins. All worshiped together and lots of shared memories and holidays and memories together growing up. I grew up in the church. My parents met at a hockey game years before, and my grandfather made sure they met, and kind of the rest was history after that. And so my dad came to faith, and so I came, I guess, in middle school, 7th grade. I was baptized into Christ. It was kind of like the thing I knew I was always supposed to do growing up in the church, and had a wonderful group of people around me to mentor me and shepherd me. I'm really thankful for. So ended up going to Freed Hardeman. Smith and I were there kind of some of the same time. There was some overlap. And eventually ended up here in Memphis, Silver Creek.
I think Luke is especially fitting to speak to a couple of things happening right now. It is, when this airs, May 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And this month of May is going to be like most months, especially for people who are closing out school or who have children who are finishing the school year strong. Luke is married to a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in education. You are around teenagers all the time, and you're tuned in with our parents. So I'd love it if maybe you just started by sharing some of the losses that you're expecting people to be grieving, maybe some of the things that are disrupted right now, given that it's May 1st. What are we looking at this month?
Yeah, I mean, I think really this time of year, spring, is usually a really busy time. I think you're looking at April and May even more so. Our calendars tend to be really full as parents, as families. Whether you have your sports seasons or your recitals, your play performances, your concerts, a lot of those end of the year celebrations and gatherings. Schools kind of can fill up the calendar really quickly as well. And so really, I mean, for not just our teenagers, I think for a lot of our younger children too, but especially our teenagers, I mean, there's entire sports seasons that just aren't happening. There's plays and recitals that were being practiced and prepared for weeks, if not months, don't happen, right? They just stop. It's over. And same thing with school. I mean, most of our students are still doing some form of online learning, but really just the spring semester or all the different events, different school activities that would usually happen aren't. And so it's just this weird time, I think, for our families, for children and parents alike, where they're used to this routine or they're used to this rhythm, they're used to things happening a certain way. And then COVID-19 comes along and it just says, never mind, right? Like we got something else planned. And so it's kind of a loss of closure or finality in a lot of ways, whether it's just, a school year, but I think for our seniors, it's even more than that. It's like an entire journey from kindergarten, all the way through school.
Yeah, it's like the last couple of pages of a big chapter, ripped out almost. So having listened to lots of teens and what they're experiencing and feeling, can you kind of voice that? Now, given that this airs on Facebook, it's unlikely that we're going to have just a flood of teenagers listening.
Right. Yeah.
I think this might help kind of voice for parents who might be listening or grandparents who might be listening some of what their kids and grandkids are feeling right now. The good and the bad, the losses and the gains.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what I've I'm hearing there's almost two sides, kind of starting on maybe the loss or the bad. I think one is there's some certainly disappointment, kind of heartbreak, devastation, whether it's not getting to have your senior prom or not getting to have graduation. Or even maybe it's interesting. What I've heard people more and more about is what we might consider smaller traditions, like seniors getting to walk out of the building together on the last day, right? Or having their car parade. And thankfully, some schools here locally have tried to still make some of those things still happen. But it's, it is, what I'm hearing a lot is it's maybe not so much about walking the stage for our kids as it is like doing those things with their peers, like having those kind of lasting experiences with their friends.
That they're just stuck with their parents.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's the thing is makes it so difficult. I think is that for a lot of them, it's not just they can't have those experiences; it's that they've been kind of forced to be disconnected from those people. Without kind of besides through phone or video chat or whatever. And so that's kind of one side of it is just a lot of heartbreak and disappointment and frustration and for not just seniors, but even, our high school, middle school students. The other side of it I've heard, and honestly from a lot more of our guys than our girls, I think our girls are more heartbroken, devastated, really disappointed. I think our guys are just over it. A lot of our guys are just indifferent, and we're both guys, Smith. So sometimes that means that it impacts us more than we want to let on. But I think for others, it's just like, you know what? Enough has been lost already. Enough's been taken away already. Like, I just want to get done, like be done with this. Like, I just want to move on to the next year or the next experience or the next thing. Like, I'm just kind of over it. Which is saddens me too. I think that saddens our parents too, because we look forward to this time of the year and this time of our kids' lives with such great excitement and anticipation and joy. And for there to be so little of that, right? For that to either be saddened by it or just like indifferent, is heartbreaking. I know there's some gains. Yeah.
Well, you were just talking about how parents might be feeling given the various losses of their kids. Can you keep going with that? Just what are some other things that parents might be feeling, might be losing, might be trying to navigate, whether they have daughters or sons?
Yeah. I think, I kind of mentioned, I don't know for some of our seniors if they are missing like going to graduation or walking the stage as much as just being with friends. I think there's a lot of parents though that are missing that. I think I only have a 4-year-old, but I've been around teenagers and their parents long enough to know, you really look forward to this time in your young people's lives, and you look forward to almost finishing off, all this time and energy and sometimes money that you've invested in your child's education, and kind of their growth and development. And so I think especially in our country, and I'm sure other parts of the world, like the senior year is just this really important event and experience. And we don't have a lot of rites of passage or milestones left in our society.
Yeah, there are very few like coming of age events in American culture.
And this may, that's right. I mean, this may be one of the only ones left. And so for that to be taken away or for that to not be done the same way, I think is really heartbreaking for parents. I talked to one of our moms of one of our girls a few weeks ago, and they are trying to make plans as a family, to still create a meaningful experience and kind of celebrate and honor. But in a lot of ways, you just like kind of hands over there. It's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to respond to this. And I don't know what to say. I don't know how to make this better. I've even heard some folks talking about feeling the sense of guilt, even though they know it's not like they've done something on purpose, right? They just wish they could do something.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of times loss can prompt, especially in people who care about you, it can prompt this rescue mentality.
Yeah.
What can I do to get you out of this mess?
Right.
The reality is most of this isn't our doing. And so it's not something that we can actually fix or just reverse. Given that, what might you say to somebody who's trying to come up with a rite of passage or a substitution? I think you and I would both say yes, grieve with them,
Yes.
but then also, is there anything that you would encourage people to do?
Yeah, I think kind of like you said, definitely acknowledge the loss or acknowledge um, that it's not okay or it does stink, right? Like it is just not cool, right? Like this is not what we wanted. But I think to still seek and find ways to celebrate and to honor and to share as a family. I think one thing that can still happen very easily is for our families, in home together to share a meal, whether it's preparing the favorite meal of your grad or your teen, or if it's to create almost your own personal graduation experience, in your home. Maybe it's to reach out to friends and neighbors and have them drive by or make a driveway visit. I think one thing that there's this sense that we've lost, this, not just this rite of passage, but this experience of getting to share with others, right? Like this, it's not just this rite of passage for your child, but it's this communal rite of passage for like a community or for an entire, age group. And so if there's ways to do that and still respect, our recommendations and our restrictions, I think there are. I think that's really meaningful. And so it's not so much to sugarcoat it or to minimize or to act like nothing's been lost, but I think the better way could be to acknowledge what's been lost, but to say, let's work together to figure out how we can still celebrate and kind of mark this moment as a family.
Yep. Yep. And I would say also, but you should probably adjust your expectations that it's not going to be as significant,
right,
as the real thing.
Right. Yeah, it's just not. And that's part of it. It's just
that's reality.
tough. Yeah.
So we talked about losses for teens, losses for parents. Are there any gains happening?
I think so. I do. And I want to be careful because I think there are gains happening for sure. But I think one thing I've seen in our family, but I've heard from others, is not everybody are seeing or recognizing the gains all at once. And so what I mean is that I think I've heard from a lot of parents, they've appreciated the extra time at home with their child, the extra family time, the time to be together and to slow down and not have such a full calendar. But in the same token, a lot of our teens are like, that's what I've enjoyed the least is being home more, right? It's not being with my friends or doing what I want to do. But as this has gone on, I've heard more from our teens about, I've really enjoyed getting to like read more. I've really enjoyed getting to just be outside and go on walks more. I've really enjoyed, like just playing games with my family again. And we haven't done that in years. And so there are gains that I think come from slowing down, almost being forced to focus on one another instead of being distracted by our schedules or our calendars or events. I'm hesitant to say that the gains outweigh the losses because I just don't know if that's true, especially for probably our seniors.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is almost this hopeful sense of like, not all has been lost. There's blessing that comes out of this. My prayer is that one of the biggest gains from this is that we have an opportunity to maybe evaluate what we prioritize. I think on an individual level, like in our own families and our homes, but even a societal level, while I think it's valuable to have rites of passage, if not being able to walk across the stage takes away any opportunity or makes us feel like we can't honor or celebrate in any way, we may be missing something, right? And again, I'm very kind of sensitive there because it is such a time of upheaval. But I think it helps us just to take a step back and say, this is a unique season where we may get to spend more time than ever with our family and kind of growing those relationships. And I hope it's a time of blessing and can be remembered that way.
Yeah. So you and I have talked before we press record, and thankfully this week I did press record. Sorry, Keith. Um, you and I talked about how your senior year you experienced significant loss in different ways than are happening right now, but it might be helpful for you to kind of share some of that experience, maybe even what you learned, and if you don't mind, speaking for your
Yeah.
parents when they're not here, what your parents were learning as they were walking with a team through significant loss in senior year of high school.
Yeah. So just quick backstory. I was a senior 13 years ago, senior in high school. I think it was fall of '06. There was not a pandemic going on, as best as I can remember. But I was going into my senior year, um, uh, part of the football team, and that had been kind of my thing, my focus, my sport, whatever you want to call it, from the time that I probably could, you know, um, tackle someone or, be tackled. And so, um,
I don't think I could tackle you in that.
you, go low, just hit low. You can take me out.
What? How tall were you? How big were you? What position did you play?
Um, I guess one of my senior year, I was probably some 6'4", 6'5", somewhere in there. I think 275 maybe. I played defensive line. I was kind of transitioned, also play some offensive line, and
Rumor has it you were a pretty good ball player.
you can't always trust the rumors. You can't always hear.
That's probably true.
That's probably true. The truth is probably that there was a lot of potential there. Going into my senior season, my family knew that if I played well enough, if I worked hard enough, there was scholarship on the table. Division One was on the table. And previous to that year, I had suffered kind of throughout my high school career. I had suffered, I think, 2 or 3 pretty severe concussions from playing sports. And then I think it was August of that fall before school started. During our 2-a-day practices, I suffered another concussion. And so before really even my senior season began, I was done. My folks remember it better than I do. But it was just kind of like this moment where, they got a call, and I guess I'm headed to the hospital, and everyone just knew, that's probably it. And so whatever we thought my senior year was supposed to be, and we're looking forward to being, it no longer was.
So it was your ticket, scholarship.
Oh yeah.
It was probably significant, important to you, connected to your identity.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you also, when you were just talking about it, you said we knew.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just something that happened to you.
Mm-mm.
It wasn't just a loss for you. What do you mean?
Yeah, it was a loss for my family. It was a loss for for those, I guess, those connected to me or who invested in me, whether it was like coaches and teammates and community. I grew up in a town where football is a big deal. There still are successful in football. Like it's a big deal.
This sounds like Friday Night Lights. This is just the plot of a season of Friday Night Lights.
Yeah. When Ashton and I watched that show a few years ago, I was like, hey, this is all you need to know. This is this tells you a lot. And so, yeah, there was a great sense of loss because, and my parents and I both, I think we would all say this now, is there was too much of my identity wrapped up in it. There was too much importance on it. There was too much of a priority.
For you or for them?
For all of us, I think it was my idol in a lot of ways.
Wow.
My identity was so wrapped up in it that when it was taken away from me, I just didn't know what to do with myself. I don't know if my parents would say it was an idol. They would say it was too important, but um, and that again, that kind of goes back to maybe what I mentioned earlier is when we experience great loss like this, it's hard, it's painful, but I think there's also this opportunity to learn and to examine, um, and
You probably weren't seeing that as a blessing at the time, though, right?
no, not at all. No, not at
If,
all.
it,
And I
if
don't,
it's your idol, you're still bowing down at that time. You're
yeah,
just
and I don't think my parents did either. I don't think anybody was seeing blessing in that moment.
What would have happened if your friendly neighborhood preacher had said, "Oh, there's a silver lining here because I think that may have been your idol."
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it would not have. It's not what wanted to hear. Even though it would have been true, right?
Yeah, but it's probably not the time to kind of process that with somebody who's in the middle of the loss.
Right. Yes. I think sometimes there's things we can't see or hear in the moment of loss, and it doesn't make them any less true. It doesn't make them any less real.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard. The very name of what we're doing here is light in the darkness, and I think when you're in the darkness, it's sometimes really hard to see the light because sometimes the it's so little, right? It's just a glimpse. Others, I think, on the outside can see it because of their perspective. It's just different. But when looking back for me, the ones that really nurtured and cared and loved and walked with me best were not the ones who tried to tell me like it's going to be okay or it could be worse or things like that. But it was ones who,
Yeah, what were they doing?
yeah, it was. My defensive line coach, Coach O. To this day, we've stayed connected.
Is he at LSU now?
It's not. He's not. Although there's probably plenty of similarities there. I'll never forget. Um, I woke up, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't know which concussion this was, but I remember waking up in a hospital bed and seeing my parents and Coach O. And like that, I think that communicates a lot. Like my parents and then a coach is there also.
Yep.
And when we found out I couldn't play anymore, he immediately kind of moves toward me and said, like, you're still going to be a part of this team. It may look different, but like, I'm almost not going to let you kind of disconnect, right? I'm not going to let you distance yourself. And so I
pursued you in a relational way, in a team sort of way.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yes.
were you apt to pull back since you couldn't play anymore?
I was. I think like maybe a lot of folks right now, I unfortunately we don't have much of a choice, but I kind of just wanted to withdraw. I wanted to disconnect. I'm sure I had the thought of, if I can't have what I want, I don't want any part.
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you remember being, I don't know, did you push back against Coach O and him wanting you to be a part of the team?
I don't remember pushing back against Coach O or the idea of being a part of the team. I think I probably pushed back more towards my parents. You're
the only teenager who's ever done that. So
that's right. Yeah, I'm really unique in that. I think that, and to be fair and honest and clear, I think my parents did an amazing job as best as any parents can, like in a situation like that, because you just can't prepare for it. I mean, you don't know it's coming. Just like now, I mean, our parents didn't know. They couldn't forecast and say like, you know what, COVID-19 is really going to mess up our family's kind of spring and all of my child's events. Um, but I think that there was probably pushback on them, and as I've heard, there's been some pushback or tension between our kids and our parents now, because usually there's not. Usually everyone there's no tension. Everybody's happy all the
That's
time.
right.
But it's hard and it's difficult because we're just together more, and sometimes you can't say anything that's the right thing. And sometimes anything you want to offer is any form of condolence or alternative. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
But parents are dealing with that too, I think, right? Like I think adults are doing the same thing too.
I was thinking of some of the things we might try. Condolence, like you said, that's not going to cut it. Distraction, that's not going to cut it. Replacement, that's
Right.
not either. Like the only thing to do now, one of my favorite authors, he calls it incarnational presence.
Yep.
Is to just come alongside and experience some of the grief with them. There's nothing. There may be things to do, but there's nothing you can do to fix everything. So I know there are other losses that were happening that senior year, as if football and scholarship and identity, your idol, as you said. You told me that there were some relationships, some friendships, some disconnection, probably some tension. But I also know that you talked to your parents recently about this. Can you kind of speak from their perspective about what it was like to walk with a child, with a teen through something like that, through a year like that?
Yeah. It was interesting because I don't know if till this previous conversation I had much knowledge of their perspective, but while they were fully aware that it was something that happened to me, or maybe I was at the center of the loss, they were experiencing great loss too. They were sad, they were disappointed, they were heartbroken, they were worried. One thing I found really interesting from speaking with them was that they were less, while they were heartbroken by that loss, what they were really concerned about was if in the long term I was going to be okay. Right. And for my case, for a physical health perspective, but also
with brain injuries in particular, I could see them being concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But also a mental and emotional health too. I became very quickly depressed. And so it was a worry of, can he recover from this part of it? Will he be okay kind of out of this season, right? After this. And that's something that I think is relative right now as well. I think there's a lot of, anytime we lose something, there's a moment, at the very least a moment, if not, a season of loss or depression and grief and anxiety. And one of my concerns I've kind of discussed with some parents is, we can have this idea of, well, maybe when this season passes, we'll feel better, things will be better, but we'll still be dealing with the loss of things, right? We'll still be trying to reflect or wrestle with those things. And so I know parents now, my parents then, they were sad, they were worried. They lost out on, getting to watch their son do what they wanted, to kind of watch him do, right? I mean, they were proud parents. And so I think in some ways,
you lost out on them getting to see you do what made them proud.
Yeah. And again, I think it's hard as children or teenagers for us to always understand what it means for our parents to see us play or to see us sing or to watch us, to dance or to act, in this case, to like walk the stage. Smith and I, we both have young children still, but already there is something about getting to just watch my son play that brings me more joy and just awe. And so I can't imagine to have an opportunity that I know carries so much, promise and um, good pride, as I would call it, for others. They just have that kind of taken away.
Yep. So, would you encourage, or I should say, how would you encourage parents now to communicate their pride in their children when those milestones are taken away?
Yeah, I think one way is to acknowledge that while the milestone or the rite of passage has been taken away, removed, that that it has not threatened like the hard work that's been put in. It has not threatened um, the hours, the investment that's been put in. I think that if there's ways to, I guess opportunities to allow your young person to sing their song or dance their dance, or perform their monologue or things like that. Again, it may not be the same. It won't be the same, but I think to still be able to communicate. Years ago, somewhere I read, I heard, the best thing you can communicate to your child is simply, I just love to watch you play. I love to watch you sing. Not that I love to watch you win or that I love to watch you be better, than the next. Or I just love to watch you, be you, to do what you love. And it brings me so much joy. Um, and so I think there's ways of almost affirming their identity and who and what it should rest in, but also reminding them, that while there has been loss and it kind of how we're maybe honoring and celebrating looks different, don't lose sight that the greatest thing that our kids can hear right now is how loved and how proud of them we are and how much joy they bring us.
Yep.
Um,
So I could see that being a challenge. You mentioned how after your senior year and kind of some of the losses that came, you started pushing back against your parents.
mhm.
So you're pushing back and they've already experienced loss. I could see a parent saying, okay, just leave me alone. Like, stop making life harder than it already is. Um, that may be happening now with some of our parents. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So can you talk through some of like lessons learned or maybe stories remembered from your parents' perspective?
Yes. I think one thing my mom helped me to, I think, understand then and now is that for parents and for adults, sometimes we can have this perspective of, this hurts or stinks in the moment, but it's going to be okay. It's going to get better. In a few years, you may not even remember it the same way or value it as much. But um, you know, I remember, and even our previous conversations have been reminded of. I think my parents did a really good job of trying to acknowledge, like, for you, for right now, like this is the most important thing to you,
Yeah.
right? As a teenager, as a young person, like this is where you are in life. This is a big moment for you. This is supposed to be, in a way, like your time and your moment. And let's not belittle that. Let's honor that. Let's call it kind of what it is. Um, and and so I think just the blessing that I received and that I remember, again, it didn't make it any easier, any better, but just kind of knowing that, I think it was almost like knowing that something that I valued or thought was important, they thought was important too. That was really meaningful. Also, a lot of grace, man, so much grace. I think in understanding that as a young person, that may have been one of the, maybe not the first for me, but that was one of the first great losses I ever suffered. I mean, I was 17, I think. I had not lived a lot of life and hadn't experienced much loss yet.
Yeah.
I think that's true for a lot of our young people as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That in some sense, this is the most significant, maybe the most significant loss they've experienced. But in another sense, like it's only going to prepare them for a life filled with many other griefs and losses.
Yes.
Um, in that way, it could become a huge learning opportunity for how to navigate loss, disappointment,
Yes.
some of those challenges. Um, Speaking of loss, I know that you're working with our teens right now on learning to lament. I think you sent me a reading plan that you were sharing with them. What was it about this time that made you want to explore lament in your Bible study with teenagers? That doesn't seem like a topic that you'd normally just say, "Oh, teens will love this."
No, it's not. It's actually a topic where it's like, oh, why would I ever want to do this? Just we started. I guess it was a few weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, and as I had, just been talking with teens and parents and reflecting on just the reality, I think lament is the language of loss. And I think if you're experiencing loss and you don't have that language, it can be really hard to process and to wrestle with. I mean, loss in general is hard to process and wrestle with. And so there was a lot of prayer and a lot of personal study. And again, I think I felt a push towards maybe myself, like an inner conflict of, is this almost sending them, into like a deeper valley, so to speak, like just almost making them do a hard thing. Is that fair right now? Because here's what we're doing is in our reading plan. I mean, we're spending time in Job, for goodness sake. It may be the most depressing.
Not the beginning, not the end. The middle part of Job.
Right. It may be the most depressing, just place in scripture. We're looking at the lament psalms, both individual and communal. We're going through the entire book of Lamentations.
Yeah, that's
It's
pretty
thick.
rough. Yeah.
Yeah. But the beauty of lament, and the beauty of biblical lament is that even in kind of the darkest, cries out to the Lord, I think even in the most kind of depressing, passages, there's always this glimpse of hope. There is always this glimpse of trust. There are some passages or Psalms where they don't show up, but if you kind of read the next chapter, you read the next Psalm,
That's right.
they're there. And so I think one of the beautiful things about lament is that it reminds us that God is big enough and loving enough and present enough and patient enough, all the enoughs to hear us, to hear our cries and our questions and our anger and our frustration, our disappointment. That he doesn't just want to hear from us when we want to, I guess, thank him for the good, but also to be frustrated with the bad. And so it's been a blessing thus far. It's definitely made for some interesting conversations and discussions. Hopefully the same in our homes as well. Tried my best to equip parents with a discussion guide to look at these passages with our young people as well. I actually think one of the best things that can happen out of this is for our parents to lament too, to show their children how to lament.
What do you mean by that? What would that look like?
Yeah. Well, as you have said many times before, like who you are, they will be, or who parents are, our children will become. And I think that an author, Michael Card, has said that what specifically Americans may need is not necessarily how to lament, although we may need teaching there, but we need to know that it's okay to lament.
Yep.
And I think our teens and our young people, our children need to know that it's okay to cry out to God. It's okay to, in a sense, shake your angry fist, at God. It's okay to express I'm sad or I'm upset or I'm disappointed or I'm frustrated. And oftentimes we don't know it's okay to do that until someone who we look up to or we love and trust does it first. Um, and in fact, if we don't see someone who we look up to or love and trust do it, we may be more likely to think it's not okay to do, that it needs to be hidden or that it needs to be pushed down, or we don't need to try to express it or to process it, but instead we just need to kind of hold it in or find other ways to deal with it.
How have the teens taken to Job, to lament, to all of this?
Yeah, I think well. I think there are definitely been some who um, um, have been hesitant to embrace it or to dive in, which I get it. It's like if you read just like the first chapter of Job, it's like, this is this is rough stuff. I don't know if I want to go any deeper. But in our kind of our Zoom discussions, um, it's been encouraging for me, and I know our other small group leaders, for our young people to kind of connect what's going on in their life and the lives of those in Scripture. For them to be able to acknowledge, yeah, even in the midst of loss or darkness or depression or frustration, there's still like enough light to praise God and to thank God. One of our members and someone who's worked a lot with our young people, Susanna Holland said often that reminding ourselves of God's faithfulness is what sees us through. And I think that's kind of where Lament leads. Is you start by crying out. You have the freedom or the invitation to ask God, to ask Him questions, to say, when is this going to end, or can you help me, or can you do something? But I think lament's designed to end in worship and trust and praise still. And sometimes I think what faith really means is choosing to trust and worship even when you look around, it doesn't seem like you have reason to.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I like what Susanna said about remembering the faithfulness of God.
Mm-hmm.
But especially if we think of this as a lifelong journey of faith.
Yes.
And this may be some of our young people's first time to experience loss and disappointment. If we help them lament, then the next time they experience loss and disappointment, then they will remember the faithfulness of God, how He saw them through even the first time whenever they felt very similar things. So it's almost like you're strengthening the lament muscles that are going to then be tools for a lifetime of faith.
Yeah, I love what you said. Strengthen those muscles, because if they're not strengthened, they're going to be weak, right? And we're going to need them. We're going to need them.
Yes, and this is not the last loss they're going to experience.
No, and for many, as we mentioned, this might be the first or one of the first, which I think can hurt so bad. It can be so heavy. One of the things that I would encourage parents to do, and I've encouraged our small group leaders to do, is to share some loss from your own life, from maybe when you were a child or a teenager, or when you were younger, and to share, like, yes, things were bad, or I experienced loss or hurt, and to share how you saw God see you through that, to share how you experienced God's faithfulness. I think that's another way to strengthen those lament muscles in others, and to kind of give them that language of lament, is for them to know, like, God's got a really good track record. It's perfect, and you can trust in that. You can bank on that. And again, I think there's such power in having the courage and the vulnerability to share some of our own stories like that, to help bring some encouragement and some hope to folks who maybe have a hard time seeing it in their story right now.
Yeah, Luke, I appreciate how you, I think that's wise words, but also appreciate how you modeled that today for us. Do you have any closing thoughts or final encouragements for folks?
You mentioned incarnational presence. And I think, it's funny. I think of Jesus, obviously, of I think the way of Jesus points us to walk with. The way of Jesus points us to say, me too. The way of Jesus calls us to move, I think, from a place of, I can see this is hard for you. I can see this is tough on you. And I can either try to lean down from where I am and pull you out of it and fix it, or I can stay where I am and say, I bet that stinks down there for you. But the way of Jesus says, no, I want to be where you are. I want to be with you. I want to try to walk with you in a way where I feel what you feel. I see what you see. And when I think about, incarnational presence, when I think about the way of Jesus, I think about, the people in my life who've walked with me. I think about my parents. I think about Coach O. I think about close friends like Smith. I think about my wife. And so it's the people that through dark times, through times of loss that have meant the most are ones who kind of leaned in and had the courage to walk with me. And that's really when I want to encourage and call our parents and our grandparents and our teachers and coaches and mentors, like those who invest in the lives of our young people, is to be like Jesus. Pursue the way of Jesus and choose to walk with our young people right now, as difficult and unpleasant as it may be. And you will be investing in them and blessing them and loving them in a way that will impact them for potentially eternity.
That's a good word. Thank you so much, Luke, for that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining us on Light in the Darkness.
Thank you, Smith.